At the moment, all we have is placeholder files for our GUI. Now we've got pages here on the right hand side, as you'll see in my Solution Explorer. And we've got a page for login, we've got a page for the loan data, we've got a page for the running costs, and we've got a page for the summary. So we have to go about designing those 4 screens, and the way in which we'll do that is largely with pen and pencil. Now this may be quite a long video because I'm going to do the design process that I use and then show you the output of what you will make in due course. So I think this may be a good 10-minute video, but we'll see how long it takes by the time I get through it. So the way in which I do it, I start with very rough sketches, and I have rough sketches just in pencil, and I'm showing you here scanned from some templates that I've told you I have and I will give to you. And I think this is a really good way of making sure that you understand how the logic of the application is going to work. I've called this system outline, and you'll see that on the left hand side we start with a login, we go to a loan screen or page, we go to a running page, and we go to a summary page. I've just given some indications of how data will be managed using the cost summary class in this particular page, but it's just a sketch. It's done in pencil, and in my scanner it's quite good, but I'm not sure I recommend it with the college scanner because I think they go very faint. So we may have to kind of develop a system where you use black pens. I might try and buy some black pens from Amazon or something. So that's what we've got to do, is we've got to just sketch out how this thing works. That's all this one says. Then we go into more design, and I'm just using pencil again, and I'm putting very rough sketches together with how we will work the layout of the screen. And I've put a question mark saying, will this go here? So maybe we won't put it in there, but maybe we will. And then in the data screens, I've just given a broad layout of what we're going to do. We're going to use text blocks and text boxes here. I'm going to use text blocks and drop-down boxes, or combos as they're called, here. And then I'm going to use text blocks here. So then we go on to a much more detailed, or we're starting to get more detail, in the next one. And what I've got here is I'm starting to do not just what the controls are, I'm giving them names, username text box, password text box. That's just a text block. It doesn't need a name. It never interacts with the logic. And I've got buttons here. And I've said I'm going to need 5 rows. Now you notice I changed this from my initial design because I'd forgotten the login row, in fact. So I've got these, and they start with index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I've got 2 columns, 0 and 1. And so that's where we're starting to get some logic. And I can look back at these and say, now where did that go? Oh, it went in column 0 in row 4. That's index 4, that's the 5th row, in fact. And then we go on to the page loan. A similar sort of detail in this one. So I've now got starting to say about the rows and the columns, and I'm starting to define the heights of each column. Now this is a system where it's a standard of multipliers. So I've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 2. I've got 6 heights I'm playing with, and I'm going to give this particular row here double height compared with the others. Now I haven't drawn it like that. I'm just sketching out, and I'm just thinking aloud, because when we get to the implementation of the final designs, when we actually make them, maybe we'll do different. Maybe we'll do different heights. Now I've got pairs of text blocks and boxes. That's a broad description of each row content, and then I've given the names of the controls I will create. That's clear button, that's the name of that button, and I've got go to costs button. So then we move on to the page of page costs. It's actually page running in the application, and you'll see I've got the same sort of detail, and I've got 5 columns here. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to use the column widths, and I'm going to span the controls for insurance across 3 columns, and the spanning of the combo across 2 columns. And this one will start in column 3 and go into column 4. This one will start at column 0 and go into column 2, and so forth. So I'm starting to get quite precise. I've got all my control names here, and I've got the clear button, and it's going to be called the go to summary button, and that's what its method will be as well. And I'm starting to do the same thing with the heights of the rows and just broadly laying them out. And that's a control title. And then similarly here, you're starting to see more detail in the annotation. I'm saying 3 columns here and 3 rows, but I've got very different row heights. This one will be 1, and these will all be 4 times the height of that one. So I'm starting to do that. Now you'll notice I'm using a phone wireframe here. It's just broadly useful. It doesn't mean that we're going to do this on a phone, although it would be perfectly valid if we decided to do this on a phone. We're doing WPF, and I think I've linked the similarity between what happens in phones and what happens in WPF with this relative heights, relative column widths. And so we've got as much freedom as we have in phone design, as you've seen when we've been using Angular and Ionic in Unit 318. So then we go on to what we can do. Now I've just started to use some colour. It helps me to think about things. Green for me is think about this. What are you going to do? Are you going to develop a style for these particular blocks of text? Are you going to use margins and paddings? How are you going to use them? How are you going to use alignment to place them in the cells? So that's me starting to think about things. So I would either add to an existing drawing or create a new drawing so that I can start to think of things. Now what I might also do is I might have a red saying, watch how you're going to control this. Red, how are you going to code this up to control? What data value are you going to display? What data value are you going to program with? So you can see that it starts to get quite complicated, but it's very structured. And in fact, what happens here is that once I've got to this kind of detail, once I've this level of indication of what things are going to do and what things are going to be, then if I have to hand this project over to somebody else, then they'll understand exactly where my thinking processes have gone. And if, for example, if I'd got to this page here and I hadn't got to this page, they'd at least know what was happening and how they should take it on from that point of view. I use pen and pencil in different ways, and I use the types of paper that I've got here as a kind of a template, a wireframe that I've got. It may be a blank sheet of paper. You've got to work out how you work it best for your own needs. What we'll do next is I will now go ahead and create these in prototype, and then I'll show you what you're going to make before we start to go into the videos that was going to follow on from here. I think it was about another 10 or 11 videos, which will say how we actually make this and how we make it function. So I followed the sketches that I made, and I've now built the copies of the page that we've got for each of the actions that we need to take. There's the login, the loan, the running, and then the showing of the summary. So there are 4. What I haven't done yet is I haven't decided how to display the help file for the login page, but I've put a button on the page to see, you can see there that this will launch the help, whatever format we decide to do it in. So all of our pages are based on a grid. All pages always are. And in WPF, you start with a grid to begin with. And then each grid has a stack panel. And inside the stack panel, we play with other grid elements to put the layout as we need it. I think in every one of these ones I've managed to do it within a single grid, but it is possible to put grids within grids and so forth, but I've kept it as simple as I can. What I've also done is I've created some basic styles. This label here, this text block here, is a caption for a text box, and I've given it a standard style so that we can call that style from wherever we want. That's control label style. And I've also got a style for the page header so that whenever you do this, you can keep them absolutely consistent and they look always the same whenever you're doing it, just by calling that style. But don't worry, I'll show you how to do that. So we go from page login to page loan, and there's the loan where they put the price of the car, the deposit, the term in years, and the interest rate. And I could have done exactly the same layout of this with label and then box, label, box, but I put label and side box just to show you how to do that as a different label style and a different text box style. And what we are doing there is we're just changing the number of columns over which these controls will span. You'll see that in this one, for example, I've got 6 rows and I've got, I think it's 6 columns. So that means that if I want this to be here, I span it over 4 rows, and if I want it here, I want it to be spanned over 2. And so that's what we do with that. And then page running, very much the same, but instead of split into 2, these are split into 3. So I've got the insurance cost, I've got the amount of the insurance cost, and then a combo that we will implement that says, is this an annual, a weekly, sorry, a monthly or a weekly cost that you're defining so that we can work out the other values from that given cost. Then finally, the summary page. Now, when we did the summary page before, I had originally set it up with just 3 rows and 3 columns, but I changed it. I got it into, I resketched it, and I thought, you know what, I'm never going to be able to do it easily and explain it to you how these controls all go. So I've gone revision 3, and there's my revision 3, where you can see I'm doing 4 and 2 as splits for these. And I'm going to do 3 and 3 as a split for that selector. And this is another 4 and 2, but I didn't make a note of that. So that's how I did that, and I redesigned it. And I do, honestly, I promise you, I always do this because I find it so much easier to make sure that you stay with what you want to do and you don't forget things. And I ended actually with 10 rows because I added another row in here for the end buttons here. So going back to the application, this all looks terribly complicated, but in fact a lot of what we do is copying and pasting. So I've defined, for example, row 1, and that's this row here, where you've got a 4 and a 2, and that's row 1. And what I've done is I just copy that, Control C, paste it down below and change the row number, and I get the next one, change the text, and everything stays consistent in terms of style. Now what we'll try and do a little bit on, I'll show you how I can take this, for example, and change the style of that, because I think it's important that we try and show you how to use these styles because they don't have to save a lot of typing. So let's launch the application and you'll see what it looks like. Now nothing works, of course. This is just the GUI. This is the only thing that I'm doing here. So there's the login, and we'll do the login page, and we'll have a clear button so that they can have another go. And the login will take them, if successful, take them to the next page. And then the help button will launch the help in whatever format we decide to do it in the end. Then the login page goes to the loan details page. So we put the car price in here. We put the deposit price. The term in years is 3. And the interest rate is 3.75. And I wanted to do these differently to show you how to format code within a text box. Go next to the running costs, so we would put insurance is £260.55 per annum, and that'll drop down and it'll say yearly and so forth. Fuel, we'll have to dream some numbers up so that I can check and validate your results. And then having got all of that information in, we go to the summary, and it will show the total loan cost, the total running cost, and the total cost of ownership. Now, having got that, I'm going to say that we've got the budget period. Now, that could be annual, monthly, or weekly. And then once you've selected that, these will be worked out in terms of how much would you pay per month for the loan, how much you pay per month for the running costs and so forth. And then that's your budget for your car that you're going to pay in each one of those periods that you select. And I've put that in there, and that just takes us back to the beginning if you wanted to have another go and show it again. So that's the GUI for our application, and it's not complicated. It's just very, very precise. That's the word I was looking for. You have to be really clear about the layouts that you're using, and that you're saying, got in row 0, I'm going to have a span of 6 and so forth. In row 3, I'm going to have a span and so forth. And it's really, really particular that you've got to be so careful about how you lay things out. It doesn't mean that it's difficult. It just means that it's very particular, and you can't just mess about with it. It gives you obviously the flexibility of layout if we do that and so forth. We've seen that before, but that's what we're going to achieve in our application. And then when you have to convert it into the mortgage, house price, deposit, term and years, interest rate, and behind this one there'll be a mortgage calculator instead of a loan calculator. Next, running costs, electricity, gas and so forth, council tax, and the other things that we had in their list, and that'll go to exactly the same screen as before. Now, having said that, this is my style, and what I'm going to hope is that everyone will develop some sort of signature style, and that we're going to try and put something in here that gives perhaps your student number car cost summary, your student number and the loan costs and so forth, so that it identifies you as the author of the code. The text, you can define your own style into that and so forth, design whatever you need, just to give a little bit of an individual touch to everything. So that's what we're going to do. And the next thing we'll do is we'll start to implement some code. And so this is getting really quite into the final sort of stages of this. It'll take quite a long time to implement the page code and then implement the code behind before you have the working application. So that's what we're doing next.